I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be. The sentence should have been, and I thought it would be maybe a little bit unclear on the transcript or unclear on the actual video. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia. Sort of a double negative.
Is Russia still targeting the U.S., Mr. President?
Thank you very much.
Let's go.
Forever ruining the double negative for me. That was the president's long-sad journey from I believe Putin on election meddling to maybe not and back in just 3 days. It raises the glaring questions we've been talking about all hour. What did Trump and Putin talk about in their one-on-one meeting behind closed doors with no aides present? And why is the president repeating this Russian talking point now?
So membership in NATO obligates the members to defend any other member that's attacked. So let's say Montenegro, which joined last year, is attacked. Right. Why should my son go to Montenegro to defend it from attack? Why is that? I understand what you're saying. I've asked the same question. You know, Montenegro is a tiny country with very strong people. Yeah, I'm not against Montenegro or Albania.
No, by the way, they're very strong people. They're very aggressive people. They may get aggressive. And congratulations, you're in World War III.
Jeremy Bash, what's wrong with these people? The reason his son should go and protect Montenegro is because when America goes to war, we call on our NATO allies to come with us.
That's right, and this alliance system has served Americans and the American people so well, and so here's the President of the United States actually plotting with Vladimir Putin to undermine NATO. I mean, nothing freaks out the Kremlin more than NATO. And so when the president says that NATO expansion, which encompassed Montenegro, and obviously NATO has been growing over these many years since the Berlin Wall fell, when the president kind of disses the whole process of NATO enlargement and NATO expansion, basically he is parroting a well-worn, well-established Kremlin talking point.
And, A.B., let me put this up. Maybe it's Montenegro, because here was the president shoving the leader of that country last year. Maybe they have a dossier and the tape of their own. That was the leader of Montenegro. We'll try to re-rack that for you. But what gives?
Well, what's amazing about the fact that Trump and Eli, sees this firsthand as he reports on the White House, Trump creates chaos on purpose. It's his comfort zone. It's actually how he operates. There's no amount of shame or outrage. There's no regret.
Here it is.
So really, it really makes him, this sort of chaos makes him happy. So when I was watching the NATO summit last week, I realized that even the Heritage Foundation had released a report saying the central focus of the summit had to be the confrontation against Russia and Russian aggression, and that the allies had to make that the #1 priority that they articulated and united behind. It is the purpose. It is one of the purposes of NATO. It is Russian aggression is an existential threat to NATO. Putin's #1 goal is to break up NATO. So the idea that Trump made the whole summit a circus about these payments and his bad comments about Angela Merkel kept them from a conversation about confronting Russian aggression. So he could end the summit by saying, I've made it stronger. We're so committed. We're so united because we're all paying more. It was a little tense and dicey, but look, this is what I did. But what he really does is do this two-step where he signs the communique after a really controversial summit and meeting of the G7 in Quebec, where he wanted to invite the Russians in and make it the G8 again. And he signs the communique and says, look, I'm really on board with NATO. But what he's doing is he is parroting those talking points, and he is doing the bidding. It's fine for Tucker, my longtime friend, to be anti-NATO. It's actually not okay for President Trump to insinuate that Montenegro is going to start World War III.
But you know what, let me just push back. It's not okay. Tucker's not my friend, but it's not okay. And the reason, if his son were in the military, the reason he would go to protect Montenegro is, as I said, because when we go to war, when we were in Afghanistan, the coalition that fought alongside us included our NATO allies. So either he's playing dumber than he is, or he's that dumb.
Every single country in the world could turn around tomorrow and say, that's America's problem. Because there are a lot of situations where we get attacked, and every other nation, like when we got attacked on 9/11, the British could have said, hey, that wasn't London. We didn't have to go. The French could have said, that wasn't us. We didn't have to go. The very nature of this is that you have to be prepared to go and help your allies. And not only is the president, obviously, he's helping Russia, and Russia's sort of playing one way or another, but it's this sort of fundamental ignorance that he seems to to have that some reporters are allowing him to have about what NATO is actually supposed to do. I'm waiting for someone to finally call him on the fact that he keeps saying, you know, our NATO allies owe us money. They don't pay us.
Let's talk about that. He thinks it's like golf dues, and like it makes me think maybe he skims, you know, I don't know, maybe I don't have any evidence that he does, but this obsession with how much everybody pays, it's not like it goes into our, you know, I mean, this is about, you know, you lead by example and you want people to pay more of their GDP, but this doesn't, it's not like a pot of money that then you can, you know, buy him a bigger plane. I mean, what is the obsession with dues? And it's more than ignorance. It's either someone like John Bolton or Mike Pompeo, people are not informing him.
Right.
We know he doesn't read his PDB, so he's not going to observe it on his own. But why do people accept these just flagrant lies about NATO?
And the other thing is, the clip we're just talking about here, it's not just the dues thing, which is a good point. His hypothetical involving Montenegro is nonsense. He was talking about a situation in which Montenegro is the aggressor. Article 5 is about the common defense. This is if Russia goes into Montenegro and attacks them. This isn't if a NATO ally attacks other people. The United States is a NATO member. We've gotten involved in wars. NATO hasn't come to our side in those wars because those were unilateral wars. So this is not a blanket situation in which everybody in NATO fights together in every single war. So I think that gets lost here a little bit, too, that this is a hypothetical that doesn't even make sense.
But any coalition, any trade deal, multilateral, and the EU is a ripoff. Everything is a ripoff if it's a coalition and a grouping. Everything has to be
bilateral. For a guy with gold toilets, he's very frugal. But you were there. I mean, how does this hatred for NATO manifest in terms of what the aides say? You know, there's a lot of time on foreign trips where you run into John Bolton in the lobby or what. I mean, you know, how do they? Do they sort of duck and cover after he says something that's stupid?
Well, they step back and they say, you know, John Bolton's job, this is from his spokesperson, but they'll say his job is not to tell the president what to do. It's to help execute the strategy. I mean, everybody here is around the president who's traveling with him on that trip is deferring to whatever he wants to do. And that's based on some hobby horse that he's been riding for decades about people ripping him off or whatever psychological thing that it is that roots that in him. There's an acceptance of that. And being in Brussels and at the summit for 2 days and sensing the unease from the Europeans, there were a couple of American congressmen who were out there, senators actually, who were there trying to reassure the Europeans, look, there is full support for NATO in Washington. Mm-hmm. And people in the crowd said, no, there's not. It doesn't matter what Congress passes a resolution 97-2. What matters is that this president continues to make it unclear, to send mixed signals to the rest of the world and to Vladimir Putin about how serious he is about Article 5 commitments under NATO. And that is something, as long as there's doubt, and the interview about Montenegro is sowing more doubt about that, whether he'll follow through, that is something that really does not make the West and Europe more secure. It makes it less secure, and it plays right to Putin's hand. And there's just, you know, there's no ability that we've seen yet from anybody around the president to focus him on that and to get him to see it a different way.
And it goes back to every time he's been asked about it. On the first trip there, it was H.R. McMaster and Dina Powell who had to badger him into affirming our commitment to Article 5.
Right, it's never been wholehearted from the president's gut.
Ever.
You know when things come from his gut.
We know. They're usually spelled wrong. Thank you, Eli Stokols, for joining us. After the break, the story of the Russian spy charged with being a foreign agent takes an R-rated turn today.